Begin with the news alert on those two USF students missing for over a week. There are new developments unfolding in the case as we speak. Fox 13's Evan Axelbank is live for us in Pinellas County. All right, Evan, tell us where you are and what you've learned.
Well, right now we're along North 28th Street North here in Pinellas County. We're at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office driving training facility, and we can confirm that evidence right now is being processed here at this location as it relates to their disappearance. Let's just show you right now. This is who investigators have been looking for since April 16th. This is Nahida Bristy and Zamil Limon.
Minister's number one priority is to keep this community safe and to locate these two USF students, and working collectively with USF Police Department and Chief Daniel, we did that.
It's heartbreaking that people want to come from another country over here to study, because we've got top-notch universities and stuff like that, and now he's not going back home. He doesn't have his doctorate degree and things like that.
On the morning of April 16th, 2026, a young woman walked out of a classroom at the University of South Florida in Tampa, stopped to help a classmate print something, and headed back to her lab. She looked completely normal, nothing unusual. Less than a mile away, a young man was at his apartment working on a doctoral thesis he had spent 2 years building. He had marked it on the shared lab calendar so his research group would know where he was. Both of them had flights booked home to Bangladesh for July. Both of them spoke to their families every single day without exception. Both of them were exactly where they were supposed to be. By 10 in the morning, her phone was dark. By 11, his was too. Nobody noticed at first. He had told his family not to call him that week because of his thesis deadline. She had a class and a lab session and a full day ahead of her. It was not until the following afternoon, when a family friend tried to reach both of them and got nothing, that anyone understood something was wrong. By then, more than 30 hours had passed since either of them had been seen. What investigators found when they started pulling the thread on where two doctoral students could have gone in the middle of an ordinary Wednesday morning in Tampa would eventually shake the University of South Florida to its foundation, devastate two families on the other side of the world, and expose a question that nobody in that system had ever thought to ask. This is the story of Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy. And before this video is over, you are going to understand how two of the brightest students at that university vanished in broad daylight and why the answer to that question leads somewhere nobody was supposed to look. Some cases begin with a mystery. This one began with a morning that looked like every other morning. Ahmed Limon was 27 years old and had come to the University of South Florida from Bangladesh to pursue a doctoral degree in geography, environmental science, and policy. He was not the kind of student who coasted. He had spent 2 years working on a single thesis, a research project examining how generative artificial intelligence could be used to monitor and protect Florida's shrinking wetlands. The work was almost done. His thesis submission deadline was April 16th. He had marked April 16th on the shared Outlook calendar for his research group, noting he would be working from home that day to finish. He had a plane ticket home to Bangladesh booked for July, his first trip back since arriving at USF. His brother Zubair Ahmed described him as humble, kind, and soft-spoken. A friend who had worked with him on a journal article said he remembered how full of dreams, hope, and quiet determination Zamil was before he left for America. Everyone who described him used the same words: serious, dedicated, gentle, the kind of person who greeted people with a smile and a question about how they were doing and actually meant it. Nahida Bristy was also 27, also from Bangladesh, and in her first year of doctoral study at USF in chemical engineering. She had enrolled at the university the previous fall. Where Zamil was deep into his research, Nahida was just beginning to build hers. But what everyone who knew her remembered first was not her academic record. It was the phone calls. There had been no single day, her brother Zahid Hassan Pranto told reporters, without contact with her family back home. Every day without exception. Her father had recently had an operation. Her mother was still recovering from the anxiety of it. And Nahida, thousands of miles away in Tampa, called every single day so they would not have to worry. She also had a July flight home booked. She and Zamil had talked, both families said, about a future together, about marriage, but both of them had agreed to finish their degrees first. They were the kind of people who made plans and kept them. On the morning of April 16th, Zamil left his apartment with his phone and his wallet. He left his passport behind. Nahida left her laptop, her iPad, and her lunchbox in the university lab. She took only her purse and her phone. A classmate saw her print something, watched her walk back toward her class, and thought nothing of it. It was a Wednesday morning. It looked like every other Wednesday morning. By the time anyone understood that neither of them was coming back, the ordinary Wednesday was already 8 days gone. The first person to sound the alarm was not a professor. It was not a classmate. It was a family friend who tried to reach both Zamil and Nahida on the afternoon of April 17th and got nothing from either of them. No answer. No call back. No message. Just silence from two people who had never gone silent before. That call to the University of South Florida Police Department on Friday just before 5 in the evening set everything in motion. Within hours, both Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy had been entered into missing persons databases. Within days, the case had been transferred from the University Police to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office as the primary investigating agency. The families in Bangladesh were already trying to make sense of something that made no sense. Zamil's brother Zubair Ahmed told reporters his brother had asked the family not to call him that week because of the thesis deadline. That request, which had seemed completely reasonable at the time, now felt like the last thing Zamil had ever said to them. Ahmed described the family as becoming numb. How can two people, he said, disappear out of nowhere? His brother had a submission. He had worked 2 years for that thesis. It was not possible that he would walk away from it. Not possible. Bristy's brother Zahid Hassan Pranto said the same thing from a different direction. There had been no single day without contact, he said. And then suddenly there was nothing. He told reporters the family was devastated, not just by the silence but by the particular cruelty of learning more about what may have happened through social media and press coverage rather than directly from law enforcement. The families were on the other side of the world, completely dependent on what investigators chose to share and when they chose to share it.
Not imagine a world without her. Everyone knows her as a very jolly person. She always had a smile on her face and all that.
In the early days of the investigation, police offered very little publicly. Detectives were following leads and conducting searches across multiple locations in both Hillsborough and Pinellas counties. Authorities confirmed they had been in contact with the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and received no indication either student had been deported. The investigation was active. Beyond that, almost nothing was released. But here is where the case takes its first turn. On Thursday, April 23rd, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office elevated the status of both Zamil and Nahida to endangered. The statement they released was careful and deliberate. Recently, information that has come to light has led detectives to consider the two endangered. To protect the integrity of this investigation, specific details about the information that led to the enhancement will not be released. That language, precise and guarded, told the public something without telling them anything. Something had been found. Something had changed the nature of the investigation. And investigators were not yet ready to say what. That same day, detectives interviewed a person connected to the case. The interview began, and then it stopped. The person being questioned chose to end the conversation before it was finished. By the following morning, everything had changed. On the morning of April 24th, at approximately 9 in the morning, deputies with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office responded to a domestic violence call at a home on Pine Glen Circle in Tampa, just north of the USF campus. It was not the call they had been waiting for. It was a separate incident entirely, unrelated on its surface to two missing doctoral students. But the name attached to that address stopped the investigation in its tracks. Hisham Salah Abug Harbi, 26 years old, the roommate of Zamil Limon. When deputies arrived at the home, they were able to move family members inside to safety. But Abug Harbi refused to come out. He barricaded himself inside the residence and ignored multiple lawful commands to exit. What followed was not a standard domestic call response. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office activated its SWAT team. The bomb disposal team was called in. The crisis negotiations team arrived. A drone unit was deployed. An armored vehicle was positioned in the front yard. For approximately an hour and a half, law enforcement surrounded a house in a quiet Tampa neighborhood while the families of two missing students waited on the other side of the world for news that had not yet come. At approximately 10:30 in the morning, Abug Harbi walked out of the front door with his hands raised. He was wearing nothing but a blue towel. He was taken into custody without further incident. By that afternoon, investigators announced they had located human remains near the Howard Franklin Bridge spanning Tampa Bay. Those remains were identified as Zamil Limon. An autopsy was ordered to determine cause of death. The investigation into Nahida's whereabouts continued. Dive teams began searching the waters around the bridge. The search for her has not ended. Abugharbi was initially charged with domestic violence battery, false imprisonment, tampering with evidence, failure to report a death, and unlawfully moving a dead body. But investigators were not finished. Evidence was presented to the state attorney's office, and on the morning of April 25th, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office announced that Abugharbi now faced 2 counts of murder in the first degree with a weapon, premeditated, in the deaths of both Zamil Limon and Nahida Sultana Bristy. Both counts. One for a man whose remains had been found on a bridge. One for a woman whose body has still not been fully recovered. Sheriff Chad Chronister addressed the public directly. This is a deeply disturbing case that has shaken our community and impacted many who were hoping for a safe resolution, he said. While the discovery of Zamil Limon's remains is heartbreaking, I want the public to know that our detectives worked and are working tirelessly and relentlessly to uncover the truth. No motive has been confirmed. The investigation is ongoing, and the question of why Hisham Abugharbi is accused of killing 2 people he lived beside and studied near remains completely unanswered in any public record. But here's where the story stops being about what happened and starts being about what was already known before it did. Hisham Salah Abugharbi did not arrive in that apartment from nowhere. Before he ever became Zamil Limon's roommate, before he ever crossed paths with Nahida Bristy, the system around him had already seen him. It had documented him. It had intervened, briefly, and then it had looked away. In May of 2023, Abugharbi was charged with misdemeanor battery. 4 months later, in September of that same year, he was charged again, this time with misdemeanor battery and burglary of an unoccupied dwelling. 2 separate incidents, 2 separate charges, both classified as misdemeanors. Both eventually funneled into a diversion program designed for first-time offenders. He completed that program in 2024. The charges were discontinued. His record, for all practical purposes, was wiped clean. The legal system had given him a second chance before most people even knew he had needed a first one. But the battery charges were only part of what the system knew. In 2023, a member of his own family filed 2 domestic violence petitions against him in Hillsborough County Court. Not a stranger, not a neighbor, a family member, someone who lived with him and had seen enough to go to a judge. One of those petitions was denied. The other was granted. A judge looked at the evidence and decided that Hisham Abugharbi was dangerous enough that a member of his own family needed legal protection from him. An injunction was put in place. That injunction lasted for nearly 2 years. When it was about to expire, the family member who had obtained it returned to court. They told the judge they did not want to run the risk of Hisham returning. They asked for the injunction to be renewed. The judge denied the renewal. The protection that a family member had specifically sought, specifically maintained, and specifically returned to court to extend, was allowed to lapse. And when it lapsed, nothing in any system flagged Hisham Abugharbi as a risk to anyone outside his family. He was free to sign a lease, free to take on a roommate, free to move into an apartment with an international student who had arrived in this country alone, with no family nearby, with no community network, and with no practical way of knowing any of what the court records contained. Because here is what Zamil Limon could not have known. The battery charges that might have told him something about the man he was living with had been wiped through the diversion program. The court records were partly sealed. The expired injunction was no longer in force. There was no flag, no alert, no mechanism that would have surfaced any of that history to a young man from Bangladesh who was trying to finish a doctoral thesis and build a life in a country where he knew almost no one. He moved in next to a man whose own brother had begged a judge to keep him at a distance, and the judge had said no. But here is the other side of what the system knew. Zamil Limon had been filtered at every stage to get to that apartment. His visa application required proof of financial means, academic transcripts, a confirmed university placement, and a demonstration that he intended to return to Bangladesh when his studies were complete. His doctoral program required GRE scores, letters of recommendation, a research proposal, and ongoing academic performance. Nahida Bristy had cleared the same gates. Both of them were tracked, documented, and accountable to a system that knew exactly who they were and where they were at all times. The same system that demanded everything from two foreign students building futures on student visas demanded almost nothing from the man whose history of violence had already been documented, cleared, and quietly forgotten. Two people who had proven themselves at every turn were sharing a city with someone the system had seen clearly and then chosen not to watch. There is no clean way to say what that means, but it is what the record shows. Late on the night of April 24th, while dive teams were still searching the waters around Howard Franklin Bridge, investigators made a phone call to Bangladesh. They called Nahida Bristy's family. They told them what the apartment had looked like when they entered it. They described the evidence they had found there, evidence that told them Nahida was gone. They told the family her body might never be fully recovered, that the search would continue but that they should prepare themselves for the possibility that there would not be enough to bring home. On the morning of April 25th, Nahida's brother Zahid Hassan Pranto did not wait for an official press release. He posted to Facebook, "Both of them are gone," he wrote. "To God we belong and to God we return." It was a confirmation that came from a brother who had just been told by a foreign government what had happened to his sister and who refused to let her become a statistic before she was mourned as a person. The Bangladeshi community across the United States and around the world responded immediately. Statements of grief poured in from academic colleagues, community organizations, and people who had never met either student but understood exactly what their story represented. The NCP Diaspora Alliance USA issued a formal statement of condolence and called for full justice. Bangladesh's embassy in Washington described the case as extremely heartbreaking. Community members called on the Bangladesh government to formally engage with Hillsborough County prosecutors and ensure the case was pursued to its fullest extent under Florida law, which allows for the death penalty in cases of premeditated first-degree murder. The USF president asked faculty, staff, and students to pray for both families and pledged that the university would remain in contact with their loved ones. Sheriff Chronister said the case had shaken the community and impacted many who were hoping for a safe resolution. The university campus, which had spent 8 days holding on to the possibility that two missing students might still be found alive, began the much harder work of accepting that they would not be. In Bangladesh, two families who had spoken to their children every day until April 16th were now waiting for what remained to be returned across an ocean. One family was waiting for remains found on a bridge. The other had been told by investigators in a late-night phone call that there might not be enough left to come home at all. And somewhere in a Hillsborough County jail, the man charged with making that phone call necessary was awaiting his first court appearance on 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. No motive has been given. No explanation has been offered. The question of why sits at the center of a case that has already answered almost everything except the one thing the families most need to know. Zamil Limon had 2 years of doctoral research almost finished. A thesis on how artificial intelligence could protect shrinking wetlands. Work that had never been submitted. Work that will now never be defended. Nahida Bristy had her entire doctoral program ahead of her. A chemical engineering degree she had crossed an ocean to earn. Both of them had July flights home. Both of them had families counting the days until they walked back through a door. What was taken from them was not just their lives. It was everything those lives were pointed toward. The degrees, the research, the futures they had specifically, deliberately, and at great personal sacrifice come to America to build. They had cleared every gate the system put in front of them. They had proven themselves at every stage. And none of it protected them from the one thing the system had already seen coming and chosen to stop watching. Hisham Salah Abugharbi faces 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder with a weapon. In Florida, that charge carries a potential sentence of death or life in prison without parole. The legal process is now underway. The motive remains unknown. Nahida's remains have not been fully recovered. Her family is waiting. Zamil's family is waiting. And the University of South Florida, which welcomed 2 of Bangladesh's most promising students and could not keep them safe, is left to reckon with what that means going forward. If you have any information related to the whereabouts of Nahida Bristy's remains or any information connected to this case, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office can be reached at 813-247-8200. Thank you for watching. Crime Spectre will stay on this case as the legal proceedings against Hisham Abugharbi develop and as the search for Nahida continues. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video. 2 people who deserve to finish what they started deserve to have their story told to as many people as possible. Zamil Limon told his family not to call him that week because he was finishing his thesis. He was so close. Nahida Bristy called her family every single day without exception until the day she could not. 2 people, 2 phones that went dark on the same Wednesday morning, and a system that knew what was living next door to one of them and said nothing. That is not just their story. That is the question every international student on every campus in this country deserves an answer to.